To 14 a.m., February 26, 1991, southern Iraq, near the Kuwait border. The desert is black. No moon, no stars, just sand and silence stretching endlessly in every direction. Inside the turret of a British Challenger tank, Corporal David Armstrong squints at his thermal sight. His breath fogs in the cold air. The screen glows green and gray, revealing a world invisible to the naked eye. He adjusts the magnification. Something flickers on the horizon. A heat signature. Faint, distant, miles away. Contact. He whispers into the intercom. His finger hovers over the trigger. For kilometers to the south, inside an Iraqi T-55 tank, Commander Hassan leans back against the cold metal wall. His crew sits in cramped darkness, smoking cigarettes. The engine rumbles beneath them. They've been told coalition forces are far away, too far to worry about tonight. The armor around them feels thick, safe, impenetrable. Hassan checks his watch. 2 hours until dawn. 2 hours until they can see again. Armstrong's crosshair locks onto the signature. The computer calculates distance, wind, temperature. Numbers flicker across his display. The tank commander's voice crackles in his headset. Confirmed hostile. Fire when ready. Hassan hears nothing, sees nothing. He takes another drag from his cigarette. Armstrong squeezes the trigger. The Challenger's barrel barely moves. No thunderous roar, just a sharp mechanical snap, muffled by the night. A projectile tears through the darkness at over a mile per second. It crosses for kilometers in under 3 seconds. Invisible, silent, unstoppable. Hassan's world becomes light. The penetrator punches through the T-55's frontal armor like paper. Metal vaporizes. The interior flash ignites. Ammunition cooks off in a cascading detonation. The turret lifts skyward on a pillar of flame. Hassan and his crew don't scream. There isn't time. One moment they exist. The next, they don single quotes. T. Armstrong watches the thermal bloom expand on his screen. A perfect hit. He exhales slowly. The other crew members murmur confirmation. The commander logs the kill. Business as usual. But for kilometers away, surviving Iraqi units scramble in panic. Radios crackle with confusion. Officers shout conflicting orders. Their comrade's tank is burning a beacon in the darkness, but no one heard an explosion. No muzzle flash lit the horizon. No warning. Nothing. Just death arriving silently from the void. How is that possible? To 14 a.m., February 26, 1991, southern Iraq, near the Kuwait border. The desert is black. No moon, no stars, just sand and silence stretching endlessly in every direction. Inside the turret of a British Challenger tank, Corporal David Armstrong squints at his thermal sight. His breath fogs in the cold air. The screen glows green and gray, revealing a world invisible to the naked eye. He adjusts the magnification. Something flickers on the horizon. A heat signature. Faint, distant, miles away. Contact. He whispers into the intercom. His finger hovers over the trigger. For kilometers to the south, inside an Iraqi T-55 tank, Commander Hassan leans back against the cold metal wall. His crew sits in cramped darkness, smoking cigarettes. The engine rumbles beneath them. They've been told coalition forces are far away, too far to worry about tonight. The armor around them feels thick, safe, impenetrable. Hassan checks his watch. 2 hours until dawn. 2 hours until they can see again. Armstrong's crosshair locks onto the signature. The computer calculates distance, wind, temperature. Numbers flicker across his display. The tank commander's voice crackles in his headset. Confirmed hostile. Fire when ready. Hassan hears nothing, sees nothing. He takes another drag from his cigarette. Armstrong squeezes the trigger. The Challenger's barrel barely moves. No thunderous roar, just a sharp mechanical snap, muffled by the night. A projectile tears through the darkness at over a mile per second. It crosses for kilometers in under 3 seconds. Invisible, silent, unstoppable. Hassan's world becomes light. The penetrator punches through the T-55's frontal armor like paper. Metal vaporizes. The interior flash ignites. Ammunition cooks off in a cascading detonation. The turret lifts skyward on a pillar of flame. Hassan and his crew don't scream. There isn't time. One moment they exist. The next, they don single quotes. T. Armstrong watches the thermal bloom expand on his screen. A perfect hit. He exhales slowly. The other crew members murmur confirmation. The commander logs the kill. Business as usual. But for kilometers away, surviving Iraqi units scramble in panic. Radios crackle with confusion. Officers shout conflicting orders. Their comrade's tank is burning a beacon in the darkness, but no one heard an explosion. No muzzle flash lit the horizon. No warning. Nothing. Just death arriving silently from the void. How is that possible? Hours before the shot, Hassan's unit had settled into defensive positions along a ridgeline. The crews dismounted briefly, stretching legs cramped from days inside steel coffins. Hassan lit a cigarette and gazed north toward the Kuwaiti border. Somewhere out there, coalition forces were massing, but distance was their ally. Distance and darkness. Soviet doctrine was clear. The T-55's main gun had an effective range of roughly 2,000 meters under ideal conditions. Maybe 2,500 if the gunner was exceptional and the target cooperated by sitting still. Beyond that, accuracy dissolved into prayer. The Americans and British operated similar constraints, or so the intelligence briefings claimed. Tank warfare meant closing the night fighting range, maneuvering for flank shots, using terrain for cover. Everyone knew the rules, and then there was the night itself. Hassan had fought in darkness before. During the Iran-Iraq War, night fighting meant chaos. Crews fired blindly at muzzle flashes. Tracer rounds arced wildly across blackness. Thermal sights existed, yes, but primitive ones grainy, short-ranged, unreliable. You could barely identify a friend from foe at 500 meters, let alone engage accurately. Nighttime was the great equalizer. It neutered technology, reduced battles to stumbling brawls where luck mattered more than skill. Hassan's unit had positioned themselves nearly 5 kilometers from the expected coalition axis of advance. Safe distance, conservative but sensible. Even if enemy tanks pushed forward aggressively, Iraqi crews would hear them coming engine noise, track clatter, radio chatter. There would be time to reposition, time to prepare, time to fight back. The desert amplified sound. Nothing moved unnoticed. His gunner, barely 19 years old, asked if they should maintain watch through the night. Hassan shook his head. Save your eyes. We'll see them at dawn. The crew relaxed. Cigarettes glowed inside the turret. Someone told a joke. Nervous laughter echoed off metal walls. They believed in their doctrine. They trusted their experience. The darkness felt like a blanket protecting them. But if Iraqi tanks couldn't shoot that far through the night, what could? Inside the T-55, the air tastes like diesel and sweat. Hassan presses his face against the rubber eyepiece of his gunner's sight. He sees nothing but black. The reticle floats uselessly in the void. His eyes ache from straining. He blinks hard, trying to force shapes to emerge from darkness that refuses to cooperate. The radio hisses static, then erupts with panicked voices. Units to the north report contact. Someone screams coordinates that make no sense. Another voice demands clarification. A third insists enemy tanks are kilometers away and possibly far. The transmissions overlap, distort, dissolve into noise. Hassan can't tell who's speaking or where they are. The fog of war isn't metaphorical tonight, it's literal, choking, absolute. His loader sits hunched beside ammunition racks, hands trembling. The boy joined the army 6 months ago. He's never seen combat. Now he's trapped inside a metal box, waiting for something he can't see to kill him. The turret feels smaller with every passing second. Walls press inward. Heat radiates from the engine compartment, turning the interior into an oven despite the cold desert night outside. Hassan rotates the turret slowly, scanning the horizon through his sight. The mechanism whines. Gears grind. He sees sand, empty sky, more sand. His thumb rests on the firing button, but there's nothing to shoot at. Doctrine taught him to identify targets, calculate range, adjust for wind and elevation. But Doctrine assumed you could see the enemy. Another explosion blooms in the distance. Orange light briefly illuminates the ridgeline before fading back to black. Someone else is gone. Hassan doesn't know who. The radio offers no answers, just more screaming. His driver whispers a prayer. The gunner asks if they should move. Hassan doesn't answer because he doesn't know. Stay still and become a target. Move and reveal their position. Every choice feels like suicide. Somewhere out there, predators are hunting. They strike without warning, without sound, without mercy. Hassan scans frantically, desperately searching thermal shadows for anything that looks like a tank. But the enemy isn't just far away. They're invisible. The second tank explodes before Hassan finishes his prayer. Then a third. The detonations ripple across the defensive line like dominoes falling in slow motion. Each fireball briefly illuminates the desert, casting long shadows that dance and die. Hassan counts the blooms. 4, 5. 6 tanks gone in less than 3 minutes. The radio disintegrates into chaos. Officers bark contradictory orders. Retreat. Hold position. Return fire. But return fire at what? A lieutenant screams that his entire platoon is burning. His transmission cuts mid-sentence, replaced by static. Hassan doesn't know if the man fled or died. To his left, a T-55 crew abandons their vehicle without being hit. The commander throws open the hatch and scrambles out, sprinting into darkness. His crew follows, stumbling over each other in their desperation to escape the metal coffin. They run south, away from the invisible enemy, leaving their tank idling and empty. Hassan watches through his periscope, unable to blame them. Another explosion. This one closer. The shockwave rocks Hassan's tank. Dust rains from the turret ceiling. His loader whimpers. The driver's breathing becomes rapid, shallow, panicked. Hassan realizes his own hands are shaking. He grips the sight housing tighter, trying to steady himself, trying to think. The pattern becomes clear. Tanks on the northern edge of their line died first. Then the destruction moved systematically south and east, carving through their formation with surgical precision. This isn't random artillery. This isn't lucky shots in the dark. Someone is choosing targets. Someone is watching them through the blackness, seeing everything while they see nothing. Hassan's gunner turns to him, eyes wide with terror barely contained. "Commander, we need to." The world turns white. Metal screams. Air ignites. Hassan's last thought isn't fear or regret. It's simply, they were hunting us all along. While American M1 Abrams tanks dominated headlines and Hollywood scripts, the British Challenger 1 rolled into the Gulf War virtually unknown. No dramatic unveiling. No primetime news segments. Just 60-odd tons of steel arriving quietly in the Saudi desert. Crewed by men who preferred tea to bravado, the Challenger wasn't flashy. It lacked the Abrams gas turbine roar, that jet engine scream that announced American armor from miles away. Its diesel engine rumbled with workmanlike indifference. It wasn't particularly fast either, barely 40 kilometers per hour cross-country, slower than Soviet designs from the previous decade. Journalists covering the coalition buildup focused their cameras elsewhere, chasing sexier stories about Abrams battalions and Apache helicopters. Military analysts offered faint praise wrapped in criticism. Yes, the Challenger had thick armor chobham composite layers that could shrug off most Soviet anti-tank rounds, but it was heavy. Logistics officers complained about transport costs. The suspension seemed outdated. The silhouette stood tall, a tactical disadvantage in flat desert terrain where low profiles meant survival, even within NATO. The Challenger lived in the Abrams' shadow. The American tank had speed, modern fire control computers, and that intangible quality the Pentagon loved. It looked dominant. The Challenger looked like something your grandfather drove, stolid, unexciting, dependable in the way kitchen appliances are dependable. British crews didn't argue. They trained in German forests and Scottish highlands, mastering gunnery in conditions where visibility measured in meters, not kilometers. They understood their tank wasn't built to charge gloriously across open ground. It was built to sit hull down behind terrain, absorb punishment, and kill anything stupid enough to present itself as a target. But the Gulf presented different challenges. Flat desert, clear sightlines stretching to the horizon, daytime temperatures that cooked men inside steel boxes, and nighttime cold that froze gun oil. This was Abrams' country terrain made for speed and maneuver. The Challenger seemed miscast, a European theater tank dropped into the wrong war. Yet British tank commanders weren't worried. They'd studied their opponents, T-55s, T-62s, even some newer T-72s. Soviet export models with downgraded armor and ammunition. Capable machines in the right hands, certainly, but crewed by conscripts with inconsistent training. The technological gap was real, still. None of that explained what happened in the pre-dawn darkness of February 26th. Armor thickness didn't matter when no one could see you. Engine type was irrelevant when your target exploded before hearing your approach. The Challenger's real advantage wasn't its armor, or its gun, or its stolid British engineering. It was something far more lethal, something Iraqi crews couldn't comprehend even as it killed them. It was what the crew could see. British tank crews had prepared for World War III in the Fulda Gap, that hypothetical killing field where NATO would bleed Soviet armored divisions, crossing into West Germany. The scenario was grim, outnumbered 3-1, maybe 5-1, facing endless waves of T-7s pouring through narrow valleys. Survival depended on impossible gunnery first-round hits at maximum range. killing Soviet tanks before they closed to effective firing distance. So British crews train obsessively for long-range engagements. Gunnery ranges in Canada and Germany pushed them to engage targets at 3,000 meters. Then for 1,000, distances where Soviet doctrine said accurate fire was fantasy. Instructors demanded hits, not near misses. Crews fired hundreds of rounds, learning to read wind, compensate for ammunition temperature, account for barrel wear. They practiced until calculations became instinct, until the sequence acquire, identify, range. Fire flowed faster than conscious thought. They also trained extensively at night. Soviet doctrine emphasized nighttime offensives, using darkness to negate NATO's technological advantages. British crews spent countless hours staring through thermal sights, learning to interpret grainy green images, distinguishing tank signatures from trucks, identifying weak points in enemy armor by heat patterns alone. Night firing exercises ran until crews could engage and kill targets they'd never see with naked eyes when the Challenger battalions deployed to Saudi Arabia. That Cold War training suddenly seemed prophetic rather than paranoid. The flat desert offered sightlines European ranges could only simulate. Iraqi tanks downgraded Soviet exports presented exactly the threat profiles British gunners had memorized, and the darkness the Iraqi crews trusted as protection. British thermal optics turned night into their hunting ground. Corporal Armstrong had fired over 200 training rounds before Kuwait. He'd hit moving targets for kilometers in German fog. He'd killed simulated Soviet tanks in pitch-black Canadian nights. The shot that erased Hassan's crew wasn't luck or chance. It was muscle memory executing perfect repetition. But seeing the enemy first was only half the equation. The other half was making sure they never saw you coming. The thermal sight doesn't show the world as humans see it. There's no color, no detail, no familiar landmarks. Just heat signatures glowing against cold backgrounds. Hot engine blocks shine bright white. Exhaust ports pulse with residual warmth. Even a tank sitting idle for hours radiates enough thermal energy to stand out like a bonfire in the Arctic. Armstrong scans the horizon through his sight, and the desert transforms. What looked like empty blackness to naked eyes becomes a landscape of temperature differentials. Cold sand registers as dark gray. Slightly warmer rock formations appear later. And there, miles away, a cluster of bright spots, enemy tanks with engines running. Crews huddled inside for warmth, metal absorbing and radiating heat. The Iraqis might as well be firing flares. Their T-55s announce themselves through pure physics. They can't hide their thermal signatures any more than they can hide their shadows at noon. They sit exposed, visible, targetable, completely unaware they're being watched. Meanwhile, Armstrong's Challenger remains a ghost. British doctrine emphasized thermal discipline, managing heat signatures to reduce detection range. The Challenger's engine sits low and shielded, exhaust vents angled downward. The crew minimizes unnecessary movement. The Iraqi thermal optics the few units that have them the British tank might register as background noise if it registers at all. This is the revolution Hassan's generation couldn't comprehend. For thousands of years, darkness protected soldiers. Armies rested at night because fighting blind was suicide. Even into the late 20th century, night combat meant chaos tracers, muzzle flashes, desperate guesswork. The side that saw first usually saw it late, but thermal imaging obliterated that ancient rule. Night became irrelevant. British crews operated in darkness with the clarity of mid-afternoon. They tracked enemy movement in real time. They distinguished between active tanks and destroyed hulks. They watched Iraqi crews dismount to smoke cigarettes, unaware they were being cataloged, prioritized, queued for destruction. Armstrong's crosshair settles on another signature. His finger rests on the trigger. Target acquired. Range calculated. Solution locked. But detection wasn't the miracle. Any advanced optic could spot heat at distance. The real question was hitting what you saw it for kilometers in darkness with one shot. The math shouldn't work. At 4,700 meters, nearly 3 miles, a tank round travels for over 5 seconds. During that time, the target could move. Wind could shift the projectile inches off course. The slightest miscalculation in range, barrel elevation, or ammunition temperature turns a hit into a miss by dozens of meters. But Armstrong's crew isn't guessing. The laser rangefinder bounces invisible light off the target and returns a precise distance. 4,700 meters exactly. The ballistic computer ingests the data range, crosswind, air temperature, barrel wear, ammunition lot number. Numbers flicker across the gunner's display. The turret adjusts fractionally. The gun elevates by degrees so small they're almost imperceptible. The commander confirms target identification through his own thermal sight. Definitely hostile. Definitely a tank. The profile matches a T-55, possibly a T-62. Doesn't matter which. Both die the same way. On, Armstrong says, indicating he's ready. Fire. The commander replies. Armstrong squeezes the trigger. The Challenger rocks backward as the gun fires. The depleted uranium penetrator, a dart of ultra-dense metal, sharpened to molecular precision, exits the barrel at 1,500 meters per second. It crosses nearly 5 kilometers while Iraqi crews blink. The round doesn't arc like artillery. It flies flat, stable, spinning for accuracy, shedding its protective sabot as it screams through cold desert air. The Iraqi tank's thermal signature flares brilliant white. Direct hit. The penetrator punches through frontal armor, superheats the interior to thousands of degrees, ignites ammunition and fuel. The T-55 doesn't explode so much as disintegrate. Turret rings shear. Hatches blow open. Fire vents skyward in a column visible even without optics. Armstrong's crew sits silent for a moment, processing what just happened. They've trained for long-range shots, yes, but this exceeds doctrine, exceeds expectations, exceeds what most tankers consider possible. The loader breaks the silence. Did we actually just confirm kill? The commander interrupts, his voice steady, but betraying the slightest edge of disbelief. Load another round. Because this wasn't luck. This was engineering, training, and doctrine converging into lethal mathematics, and it wouldn't be the last. The Iraqi 52nd Armored Division didn't retreat because it was defeated in traditional terms. Most crews never fired a shot. Many never even saw a coalition tank. They retreated because continuing felt like volunteering for execution. Reports filtered through Iraqi command channels describing impossible scenarios. Tanks exploding at distances their doctrine said were safe. Crews dying without hearing incoming fire. Thermal signatures vanishing from one moment to the next. Erased by an enemy that remained invisible. Officers tried issuing orders, but radios transmitted only panic. Units that maintained formation discipline 1 hour dissolved into scattered individuals the next. Some crews abandoned operational tanks and fled on foot. Others drove south, away from the front, engines screaming, hoping distance would save them. A few dug their tanks into defensive positions and waited, guns trained on empty horizons, knowing that if the enemy appeared in their sights, they were already dead. The psychological calculus was simple. Fighting back required seeing your opponent. You can't shoot what you can't see. Coalition intelligence officers monitoring Iraqi communications noted the shift. Intercepts revealed not tactical discussions, but existential dread. Commanders asked questions that had no answers. How do we fight tanks we can't detect? How do we defend against weapons that kill from beyond our maximum range? The questions themselves became weapons, eroding confidence faster than any artillery barrage. By February 27th, entire battalions had ceased functioning as cohesive units, not because they'd been destroyed many retained combat-capable vehicles, but because the will to fight had evaporated. Soldiers who survived the Iran-Iraq War, men who'd endured years of grinding attrition, broke under 3 days of one-sided slaughter. The British Challenger battalions advanced through abandoned positions, past idling tanks with hatches open and interiors empty, past equipment depots still stocked with ammunition. Iraqi forces hadn't been defeated in battle. They'd been defeated by the realization that battle was pointless. One of the most dominant tank performances in military history was unfolding in near silence, and almost nobody was watching. The record stood quietly, the longest tank-on-tank kill in history, for 1,700 meters. Confirmed, February 1991, British Challenger 1. Crew unidentified in most reports, target obliterated before a new danger existed. Military journals published the statistics in dry technical language. A few defense analysts noted the implications. Then the story faded beneath more dramatic Gulf War narratives' highway of death. Apache gun camera footage, precision-guided bombs falling down ventilation shafts. The Challenger never became iconic. No movies featured it. No model kits flew off toy store shelves. The Abrams remained America's poster child for armored dominance. The Challenger returned to European bases, its crews resuming training rotations. Its moment of lethal perfection reduced to footnotes in armor warfare manuals. But the lesson survived, even as the story faded. Modern tank development shifted irreversibly. Armor thickness mattered less than detection range. Gun size became secondary to fire control systems. Speed and maneuver couldn't compensate for technological blindness. The tank that saw first, fired first, and hit first would win. Everything else was engineering details. Thermal imaging became standard across NATO armies, then worldwide. Laser rangefinders, ballistic computers, stabilized guns technologies the Challenger employed in 1991 became baseline expectations. The gap that allowed British crews to slaughter Iraqi tanks from impossible distances narrowed as every modern military scrambled to avoid becoming the next blind target. Yet the wider truth remained uncomfortable. Warfare had crossed a threshold. Darkness no longer protected anyone. Distance no longer guaranteed safety. Soldiers could die without warning, killed by enemies they never saw, firing weapons from ranges that seemed like science fiction a generation earlier. The Iraqi tank crews who perished in southern Kuwait didn't understand what killed them. They couldn't. Their training, their doctrine, their entire understanding of armored combat belonged to a previous era. By the time they realized they were in range, the war had already moved past them.